Welcome back to another episode of Six Figure Certified Coach, the podcast. I'm Liv Chapman, and I'm here with someone I literally met 3 days ago, Phoebe Duprey. She is the co-founder of a company called Real Merchant Services, and I'm going to let her tell a little bit about herself, but we met in the craziest way, so we'll tell that story too. And if you are a woman and you've ever been through some shit, like just keep listening and don't stop. All right, Phoebe, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So thank you. So you and I met a couple days ago. The reason how we met was because I had a podcast with Brad Lee. So Brad's my business partner now. This year we've launched a payments company, so merchant services, company called Real Merchant Services. Yeah, and I don't have a glamorous, list of accomplishments here. It was a single mom. I just kind of kept working my butt off for years and years and years and rolling into new and bigger opportunities. So I started a business about 5 years ago. And then since then grew my own business exponentially. And then I ended up partnering with Brad, like I said, last year. Okay.
So I don't know that 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I would have even known what merchant services is. So for everyone who is listening, which most of our listeners are business owners or just getting started or thinking about it. So can you tell people what that means?
Yeah. So I honestly didn't know before I got into the industry, and even probably the first 3 months into the industry, I was still confused. But basically every time you purchase something from a business, whether it's online, in store, over the phone, whatever, every time you use your credit card or pay with cash, there's a merchant services company that has technology and hardware and software that helps businesses process those payments. So our company is the one, when you go and swipe a card at a store, we're the company that the software literally takes the money from the client's credit or debit card and then puts it in the business owner's bank account. Now, within that transaction, business owners pay fees to process those cards. So every time you as a buyer goes to a business and swipes your card, the business is paying on average 3% of whatever that transaction was just to process that transaction. So our company is the one that handles the reporting, the deposits, the tech support, the hardware, the software, basically everything a business needs in order to complete those transactions, which is essential to every single business.
Every single company that takes credit cards. I think when I was listening to your podcast interview with Brad, he was like, but what about cash or something? And I was like, who doesn't take credit cards?
Sorry.
Even like online business, like no one's coming, like sending me a check in the mail or dropping off cash. Although if you'd like to, I'll leave my address in the show notes. Just kidding. But, so merchant service. And so when I heard Phoebe on this podcast, I think I was like scrolling on Instagram, which in a previous episode, I declared I was going to do less of. However, look at it paying off. So I am captivated by this headline that says like, what did Brad post as the headline?
I think it said something like
you're psycho
or something.
Yeah, I survived a psycho, and I'm thinking in my mind like same. So I'm gonna keep listening to this, and then I realized it was Brad, who I feel like is very masculine and like, very business. And then I hear your story, and I'm like, oh my god. So I end up going on to Apple, listening to the whole episode, hearing more of your story, and then I'm like, I actually need what she's selling too, because we just looked at the annual review for our company, and it's like tens of thousands of dollars go to credit card fees. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, so I can save money here.
Yeah. So what we do is we go and we work with business owners. We get a copy of, every business owner knows this. They have reporting at the end of the month that shows how much they processed, how much they paid. We go in, we tear apart the whole statement, see where we can save you money. And then within a day, get an answer back to companies about how we can offer them better solutions, how we can offer them better, processes to accept payments, and then in turn, lower those processing fees and provide better service than they had before.
Yeah. Well, I love that too. And obviously we're switching over to Real Merchant Services. And the great thing is, like, when I had filled out the form on your website after I listened to the podcast, you called me And I was like, oh my God, wait, is this Phoebe from the podcast? And so I love that. And I think it also sets such a good tone for a working relationship because, and I know you talked about this before, but it's that customer service element that like us working with bigger processing companies, if we have like a high risk payment or like a chargeback or something, we don't get any like one-on-one customer service. There's no one to actually talk to.
Yeah.
So that like personal touch is so important to us, especially as also a women-owned business.
Yeah, especially in the space that you're in or with coaching or some of these businesses like we talked about yesterday that are considered high risk. A lot of people have, you know, and it's almost shocking to know how little business owners know about their payment systems. And your payment systems are extremely important because that's like the reason why you're in business, right? Is to make money. So if something interrupts your flow of payments or your payments are disconnected or, you know, you're deemed a liability to be set up with a payment processor. A lot of business owners don't know that by the way they're taking payments, they could be set up to or dropped by their payment processor. That's like what we were talking about with Stripe. There's higher risk businesses and lower risk businesses. So a lot of people don't understand that they're in a certain category and that they have to stay within certain metrics or else their accounts can be dropped by processors and then they can no longer accept payments. And when you get to that point in your business, obviously that's a disaster because you could be working for 10 years on a business, get to a point where you're making a ton of money, and then Stripe, you know, gives you a call one day or sends you an email that says your account's being closed and we're holding $50,000 for the next 9 months, you know? And like you said, there's obviously customer support people on the other side, but they don't actually care about your account because they're, you know, W-2 employees. And so why would they? They don't care whether you process or not. It's like, too bad, so sad. You hit this mark in our fraud metric and, you know, your account is terminated.
I like it, like it gives me nightmares now to think of that kind of thing happening. Although I've like heard of it before, but I never knew why and how and like, but obviously if you can prevent that. And also we'll obviously link Phoebe's company in the show notes to Real Merchant Services. And it was super easy. You know me, I'm like, if it's not easy, I probably can't do it, but it was super easy. It was like 4 questions, upload a balance. What is it called? Balance statement that I uploaded?
Yeah, from Stripe, you have to upload your balance statement. Stripe doesn't give you actual reporting. So it's either you upload your merchant statement or a list of your transactions, and then we give you the savings proposal.
Yeah, so it was really easy and really great. So that's something you need in your business, which every business does because every business makes money. Click the link in the show notes. But now I want to go to the real stuff. So I know you're not technically a single mom anymore, but I am. And I know a lot of women on here. We were just talking before. I'm like, I feel like so many women that come to coaching or come to entrepreneurship, like finally make enough money and they're leaving, you know, bad jobs or bad relationships, bad marriages. And I know you have a few different stories in there. So start wherever you want.
I guess like, you know, going just as far as this week, right? Just recently, the things that have happened, the things that I'm very shocked about is, you know, I told my story and obviously like my story is, filled with like just tragedy, right? At certain points in my life. And like, I didn't have an easy 10 years. And I had a lot of bad relationships. And I think what I'm noticing through all the comment strands is it was really funny because we had about, I don't know, I think like 500 comments or something. And the women all tended. So what I talked about on the podcast was a previous relationship that I had that started out to what I thought was really great. Like I was going to marry someone. And then about 7-8 months in, just quickly, like I got the rug pulled out from under me. So, and what I found was that a lot of women have been in that situation where they think that there was someone who's really nice and then they get sucked far, just like far enough in, right? To be committed to someone, move in with someone, share bills, you know, car payments, cell phones, whatever, you get your life entangled with them. And then they show you who they really are. And a lot of the men in those comments, and so just to say it on here, I was in a relationship where my boyfriend became very abusive to me, and then he killed my dog. And a lot of the men in the comments were writing things like, hashtag, you killed your dog, you're stupid, you should have left, you should have known, look at you, crying victim mentality. And like, the whole point of the podcast, right, was to say that I've been through these terrible things, but if you keep going, like, don't stay in the terrible things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what a lot of men, I think, or a lot of the men at least that were commenting those things, what they don't put together and what they don't understand is that, you know, if you're younger and you have a terrible home life, or if you're younger and your parents are not the best display of a relationship that you should follow, right? Like the example, you don't really know how you should behave within your own relationships, right? And you don't have standards for what your relationship should look like. So something that I always say to my fiance now is, you know, you have a huge responsibility because my daughter and my son have seen terrible examples of what it's like to be a man. And the only way that we're going to reprogram their brain, right, that men are good and you should be married and you can find a happy relationship, this is how people should treat you. Even for my son, like I didn't want my son to grow up and think that men were terrible people and he was going to grow up into that, right? Like that was his destiny. Or my daughter to think her destiny was that she's going to grow up and be in an abusive relationship and men are evil and aggressive. And so I lost my train of thought there, but a lot of guys in those comments, they're setting that example of what I believed was true at one point. So I believed at one point that men were aggressive, men were angry, men, you know, weren't going to provide like the emotional stability that I wanted. If I said I wasn't comfortable with something, men would always be saying things like, you are jealous, you are insecure, you know, and beating those insecurities into me to where I became that person. And it wasn't until into my 30s that I became someone who had more standards for myself, and just a better grasp of like what was going on in my life, what I wanted for myself. And then I realized how to look back into my history, see the things that I did wrong, and then, you know, change that going forward.
I think that takes a lot too. And I appreciate that you were like, it was like 10 years of this, because I think sometimes we're like, oh, I've been in it for so long, like I may as well just keep dealing with it. But I think it's also a good lesson in like, it's never too late to reset the standard for yourself and what you're willing to allow, especially for your kids. And what you're saying really resonates with me because I have two boys, and they have seen some stuff that is very unimpressive, if not abusive, from men in their life, and some of which that I brought into their life. And I'm like, never again. Like, I think you get to that point where you're like, I will never, ever again allow this to be the norm in our family. I think like we would call it breaking generational curses even.
Yeah, 100%. Like even I remember, you know, I'm not going to say any specifics, but you know, there have been men in my family that have been very violent. And when I was younger, it didn't really bother me. I'm not saying like I grew up and, you know, was any kind of a victim because of it. But I think what happens is, and I shared about this on the podcast a little, but as you know, when you're exposed to something over and over and over, it's less shocking. So when you're younger, if you're exposed to violence, if you're exposed to dysfunction, if you're exposed to toxicity, like your brain just doesn't like, it just doesn't register as something that's scary anymore. It just becomes like a normal part of the routine. And so then when you grow up, it's like a lot of experiences you take from your childhood, and then you start to become an adult and be in a relationship, and you don't recognize signs of dysfunction. You don't recognize signs of abuse because it was just always part of something that was like, you know, just like an everyday thing for you.
Yeah, normalized.
Yeah. And then you become an adult and you're like, why are these things happening to me? And you're like, I didn't even see it coming. And then it happens again. You're like, I didn't even see it coming. And then it happens a different way. And you're like you get to a point, you're like, am I broken? I'm like, am I like a psycho magnet? Like people are even calling me that in the thing, but you know, you have to try to give yourself grace and understand that there's a lot of lessons to learn and like reset those standards, like I said, so that it doesn't happen again.
I really want to applaud you too for like being so brave to go on such a large platform and share that stuff, because I remember when the first breakup with my kid's dad happened, and this was almost 5 years ago at this point, but it was so bad and so shameful and so embarrassing.
Yes.
And we were only a couple years into our, like starting the company, and I'm like, oh my God, like no woman is going to trust me that I've been like blind to this, you know, abuse and lies and manipulation for so long. But actually sharing it was like the biggest breakthrough that I could have had, like as a woman, as a mom, and as a business owner. Now, did I continue to repeat the pattern a few more times? Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah, I did that too. So if you didn't know that and you're listening, that also happened. But I think it takes being able to speak up. And I know we were chatting a little bit before, we started recording, and you were like, the messages from women in your inbox were like so supportive.
And wild. I have people that I've known for 10, 15 years, like call me and be like, thank you so much for sharing that. Like, I've been struggling in silence. And, you know, some of the stories that people told me, like, I thank God it was just what happened to me. Right. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you mentioned something about the shame that surrounds it. And I think what happens, and I think that, you know, like if you notice a lot of the men that were commenting on that post, I've like risen above those comments now. They don't affect me like they did. But if you're in a terrible situation, let's say in a relationship, and you have kids, like, and you go to break up with them, all of a sudden, like, someone made a comment in that post and said, oh, she must have been bored with regular guys, and no one would love her children anyways, or no one would want those children anyways, or something. And like, as if like I'm this like undesirable, like undeserving, like piece of trash that no one would love anymore because I had children. And something that happened to me from having, you know, I don't know how old you were when you had your kids, but I was 18 and 19 when I had my kids. And I knew that I shouldn't have been with their father. It wasn't a serious relationship. I just, you know, sometimes people get pregnant, and like, I want to bring my kids into the world and I want to love them, and whatever happens, like, I'm going to do my best to take care of them. And after that, I was essentially shamed. So I ended up having my child. We were breaking up out of the relationship. And I know that sounds funny because we had another child, but I got pregnant when my son was, I had my son at 18. I got pregnant when my son was 5 months old. Wow. So then I had my daughter. And then right away after I had my daughter, we broke up. So I was on my own at 19 with 2 kids under 2.
Wow.
And so what happens is when you're younger, your friends pull away from you. No guy in his low 20s wants to date a girl that has 2 children by herself. Like, they don't have money to support you. They want to go out and party and drink. They look at you like you're some like loser idiot that like has 2 children. And I'm looking at myself like, I'm a strong human being who said, no, I don't want to have an abortion. Yes, I'm going to love my children. I'll do whatever it takes. And no one around me was reflecting that back to me and praising me and saying that I was a good person. So then I started, you know, absorbing everyone else's thoughts that I was, like I said, undesirable. No one wanted to hang out with me. And so that all wears away on your self-confidence. Yeah. And so when you have insecurities and low confidence, then yes, there's room for people in your life that are going to be mean to you and take advantage of you. And then I got stuck in that cycle because I was working 2 jobs. I never went out. I didn't have time to meet, you know, new people that were better for me, or be in rooms with bigger thinkers or better people. And I was just stuck in this rut. And I see, like, from the messages, there's so many people who are stuck in that, you know, cycle of like, how do I break this cycle and find someone that's good for me and find my match and find someone that's going to love me?
Yeah. And a couple of things in what you said, it's like, what part of people's opinions, as much as we're strong women and independent, they weigh on you over time. It's one of those things that somehow, either consciously or subconsciously, can get ingrained with us. And if we don't have that level of self-awareness and, you know, desire or will to like do inner work or go to therapy or kind of rewire the, you know, input that we're getting, I think it does often more subconsciously just set us up for more of the same, you know, being treated like you're not worthy, not getting what you deserve, being in abusive relationships. And it does, I think, take a lot of work, but it's not impossible. I think we can both attest to that. And also it's worth it. Like, you said something that blew my mind yesterday when you said like you had never made enough money to make good choices. And like, it's been ringing in my brain because I'm like, oh my God, like I feel this on so many levels with the women that we talk to at IGC too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I'll see it, you know, I know a lot of people, and like I said, even since I posted that, so many people coming forward and saying about these terrible things that have happened to them. And so, you know, you think of the typical relationship that you want to be in, where the woman gets to stay home and be with her kids, and, you know, she doesn't have a career, and the man goes out and provides for them. And like, it sounds like this like dream life, right? Yeah. But then you throw in some like toxicity and abuse. And then all of a sudden you're a woman who has no way to support herself, has 2 children that she has to care for, that she's fearful if she breaks up with the person that they're going to go to court. The dad's going to get 50-50 custody. If the dad has more money, he can fight with an attorney. She doesn't have an attorney to support herself. There's all these scenarios that happen. And so that's how women get caught up in staying in these relationships that aren't good for them. And the underlying reason isn't because, I said this the other day to someone I was talking to, if you had $1 million a month coming in, would you ever speak to that man again? And the answer is no. Like, you wouldn't. You would look at him like he's the biggest loser POS on earth. And you would immediately just block him and never talk to him again. But the reason why people stay with those kinds of men is because A, they have no money. B, they don't think that their life will be better without them. They think that that man is going to, like I said, take away their kids or ruin their reputation. Or, imagine if you have a big house with your husband and he's abusive to you and you want to move out, and then you have to move you and your kids into like a low income apartment in a bad neighborhood or something. And that's the other choice. That you get put in these situations where it's almost impossible to work your way out of it. And then, pile on insecurity and low confidence and like all of these things that the relationship causes. And then it's like you're stuck in this mental state where you can't help yourself out of it.
Mm-hmm. So what's the remedy?
Yeah. So the remedy for me was to make money, really. Yeah. So, I always worked 2 jobs, and I was, I always made like $80,000 a year, somewhere around there, but that was to provide for me and my kids. But I worked every single day for 8 years. And sometimes I paid babysitters who would make more money than I did, like bartending. And so I got to a point where I'm like, I just figured, I used to say to myself, if I could just make $25,000 a month, all of my problems will go away. And it was before that all my problems went away. Like, once I made the cool thing about our industry, or the industry that I'm in, is you receive residual income. So you can make all the money that you want, but if you stop working and you stop making money, it still feels different and you don't have that freedom. And so what my career did for me was, once I had, like I said, when I was in that abusive relationship, all I could think about, I was in Baton Rouge. I had to go to this, like, domestic violence, God, I don't talk about this enough, and I still get, I don't know if you can hear my voice, I get like a little shaky inside when I start talking about it, but they sent me to these like group classes of basically battered women. And I remember I would show up there like in my like work clothes and like in my, just like dressed nice and professionally. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, what is this? I'm like, this is not my life. I'm like, I am not like a battered woman victim, like all of these things, like, oh, have your victims assistance coordinator and all of these things that they call these programs. And I'm like, I am not one of these people. I'm like, I'm going to work and get rich and move. And like, thankfully I had enough money then coming in where I removed myself from that situation. I moved out of state. I changed absolutely everything. I hid from social media, right? And I was able to move. And then I said to myself, I remember, so I moved from Baton Rouge to somewhere else that I'm not going to say just for safety reasons, but I moved somewhere else. And I remember like sitting down in the closet and I was so traumatized after everything happened to me that I usually used to sit in like stairwells or my closet or whatever, so I could just sit in silence, so I could just try to like decompress. And I remember thinking, like, if I stop here, then my children's lives was, my mom moved to Louisiana, my dad left us, then my mom had a crappy boyfriend, then some guy physically abused my mom and killed my dog, and then that's it. I'm like, that's their life. I'm like, what I like to say to women, because when I talk to women about this, they'll say, like, you can read a lot of the comments on the post too. They say, I'm never dating again. This is why I haven't dated in 4 years. And so they've essentially given up on happiness and given up on a relationship. And I always encourage people, like, don't let your story end there, right? So don't let someone who's abusive come in and change the trajectory of your life because they were a piece of shit at one point. And so I encourage people to, there's a lot, I think, circulating on the internet right now about toxic femininity and women in careers and women who don't have jobs until, or build their careers and then they're 30 and then they want to have kids and how bad it is. But there is the other side of that, right? Where if you don't have that for yourself and you don't have money coming in, you're very vulnerable and people can take advantage of you and people can hurt you. And there's nothing you can do about it because you have no freedom or no choices because you have no money. There are some things that I think that women are continually fed, and the messaging needs to die. Like it just needs to end. And like I say with Brian, like, I'm like, we watch The Sopranos, and what's in The Sopranos? They're in strip clubs every night. They're getting, sleeping with hookers. And then there are these like macho guys and the women stay with them. And it's like, that's the story and that's the narrative. And that's what we see every day. And so when it's happening in your own life, you're like, well, this is normal. This is what I see. This is what our culture is. And no one's really stood up to tell women, like, I'm not saying don't be a housewife and don't love your husband and don't be feminine, but definitely make sure you have your finances in order, because if anything should happen, you need the ability to get up and move, and you need the ability to take care of yourself. And there are careers out there like my industry specifically, you can work in my industry for 5 years and then you're still getting checks of residual income. So if you want to go be a mom, you want to take time off, you want to be a housewife, you still have paychecks coming in. And there's no man that can ever control you because you have control of your finances. Yeah.
I love that. Can you talk a little bit more about like how, I know you're always hiring new agents. I think you have like an influx of candidates at this point, but can you tell a little bit more about like what that looks like for women?
A lot of the messages that I got on Instagram were, I really resonated with your story. I really feel like this was meant to be. Thank you so much for sharing it. I'm in a situation right now where I'm not happy at home. I want to leave, but I don't have any money. I can't take care of my kids. And so, not to say that this industry is just for women. I just found like, even when I was out and I would be like cold calling, going door to door, introducing myself to people, like just absolutely pounding the pavement in the beginning of my career, people used to say sarcastic things to me and say like, oh, you're the same as every other merchant services agent. And, what makes you so special and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, at the end of the day, like I could tell you all about rates and service and whatever, but I'm dedicated to my career. And the reason why I'm dedicated to my career is because there was one point in my life where my daughter had a chorus concert, and if she wanted me to go, I couldn't go. My daughter's sick at home vomiting and I can't take time off work, right? Because there's no one to watch her, or I can't afford a babysitter. And it's like, you get stuck in these situations. And even like, women or people staying in relationships because they're like, I need the person to pay the other half of my rent. Right? Like, how many times have you said that? Oh, I would leave him, but how am I going to pay my bills? And so for women, especially when you come into this career, you can take it at your own pace. You can work as much as you want, as little as you want. And once you sign up an account and once you work with a business, you get paid a small percentage of the fees that the company charges. And it gets paid to you as a monthly residual income. So every month that you're going and you're adding accounts, your monthly residual income is growing. And so if you just consistently keep working at the business, before you know it, you look down and you have 10 grand a month coming in, and then 15 and then 20. And you're like, holy shit, like I can do anything I want. I can move anywhere I want.
Yeah.
I can buy myself a new car cash, And
I know. I just feel like everyone listening, like think about that for a second. Like if you're making 10, 20, whatever, $1,000 a month, like residual, like what would be possible for you? I think that's a question people really have to like feel into or lean into and like think about, because not that you have to leave every relationship because you have money. I mean, my ideal is more like the Grant and Elena Cardone ideal, like build the empire together. Like we're both contributing and like everything's working in harmony. But I've also been in the place where there was no harmony. And I remember the day that I found out about my kid's dad, I had moved me and the kids out within 7 days. I think it was less. I was like, we are out of here. And I could only do that because I had this company and 100% like made all the money in the house.
Yeah, it's a really, really powerful thing. And I just don't think that, obviously after listening to this, people are just going to go off in your head and be like, I think that when women or people like really dial into the reasons why they're with someone, a lot of it is just because of money. And like you said, like, you're like, thank God I was able to get up and leave. But So I'm really, I think what I was going to say is when I was talking to business owners, I would literally say to them, like, I'm so dedicated to this career, which means I'm dedicated to you, right?
Yeah.
Because if I don't pick up your phone call, or if you're not happy with the service we're providing, you're going to cancel. If you cancel your contract, in my head, it's not I lose money. In my head, it's I can't go see my kid at school. I can't take a day off. I can't go to her cheerleading practice at night. I can't make my own schedule. And then I'm subject to whatever anyone else wants to throw at me because I don't have any money behind me to like strengthen my decision making.
So it's like the level of care is deeper. Because it's also like that purpose-driven care. Like people will say, like, what's your why? Yeah. And like, if you're not tied, if you don't have that like connection to your own purpose, like, I don't really think you're going to be that successful at anything because what's the drive?
Yeah. And you see that a lot. A lot of people want to get into the industry, but I tell people who get into this industry, like, you really have to have a deeper reason because, like, having your own business, being in sales, there is so much rejection that you can't even count it after a certain point, right? You just know that my life is going to be, 80% rejection, 10% undecided, 5% a-holes, and then maybe 5% of people will work with me, right? And so you just learn that the rejection and the struggle becomes like your entire life, and then but you thrive in it. And when people first get thrown into that space, I think a lot of the times if their why isn't stronger, then the pain that they have to go through in order to become successful, then they quit.
Yeah, people aren't willing to like get their feelings hurt or get rejected a lot. I feel like if I'm not getting rejected, it's because I'm like not working hard enough.
I don't know if Brad said this, but I was on someone's training thing one time and they said, like, how much do you get paid when a client says no to you? And everyone's like, $0. And he's like, well, if you make $1,000 for every 10 clients you reach out to, that's your closing ratio, then every no, you just got paid $100. And so I think when people can reframe their thinking around rejection and reframe just like what it all means in the long run, I don't think that we're taught that, when we're in school or when we're younger to think about things like that. You're only thinking about winning. And then you're like, oh, I lost 10 times, I lost 15 times, and then I got one account. And you're like, okay, well, if you're going to make $7,000 for the year from this one account and you had to talk to 30 people to get there, well, then you got paid X amount of money per all those people. So you're still getting paid. It's just in a different format.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've actually never thought about it that way either. But it's like that's the work that goes into making X amount of dollars, right? And you can do the math for whatever it is. But so your agents, like they go out and get their own business. They basically go and say, like, let me see your reports. I can save you money on your merchant fees. And then they make a percentage of the fees.
Yeah. So the new agents that come into our company, when they bring a deal to us, let's say, for example, we say, okay, the deal is worth, right now we can save them, let's just say the deal is profitable, $600 a month. That means that the company gets $300 a month for doing all the support, having the office team, carrying the risk of the transactions, because there is risk involved with processing payments for business owners. So that's part of the reason why they pay the fees, plus the support, hardware, software. But then the agent gets 50% of that deal for just bringing in the account and then maintaining the relationship. So they're like kind of the liaison between the business owner and the company, and then the company takes care of everything else.
Yeah. I mean, it's brilliant and it's so simple. I mean, I've heard some crazy sales and commission structures, and I like that. So I'm just thinking, like, I feel like I have a million questions, and I'm like, what do people need to know? And I always ask this, but like, what do you feel like is your best advice for women listening to this who are just starting a business, or, maybe they're a little bit in, but not like making the money they want, you know what I mean? The women in the growth part, which I think we all are.
I don't know. I've always, like a lot of our parents were like, everyone can probably relate to this, where the dads are like, turn down the thermostat and like clip coupons and save money. And, I saw my parents do that, and my parents provided for us. Like, I'm not complaining about the life that they gave us ultimately. Like they did their job. But I remember growing up and thinking, like, I don't ever want to be like that. I don't ever want to be cold in my house because I'm worried about how much my heat bill is. I don't ever want to be uncomfortable, like physically uncomfortable because I'm worried about money. When my children ask me for something, I want to say no because I want to, not because I can't afford to. And those things just really, like, I don't know why, but they've just always irked me. It always bothered me. And I hate having to, like I said, and it's probably because of my history, is make decisions because of money. And so what I would tell women to do is, if you feel like that, there are ways out of it. There are tons of companies. Even, Brad, my business partner, has solar companies and life insurance companies and, companies like yours. Like, there are a million different ways to make money. A lot of it has to do with growing a business and being in sales. And a lot of people are scared of sales. And so what I would tell people to do is to find people that you want to be like, right? Find people who are in the position that you want to be at. And when I say that that's life-changing, I mean, even since having the relationship with Brad and some of his friends, like Maddie and Renee Rodriguez, like my life and where my life was going just skyrocketed because I met and created relationships with the right people. And so if you're sitting at home and you're like a stay-at-home mom, or you don't have a good job and you feel like, you're helpless, you have to start hanging out with people, even just step by step by step, of where you want to be in that next level, because they're going to teach you things that you didn't know. They're going to give you a new perspective. You're going to have all of these different ideas firing off in your head about how you can change your life. And then the very important part, and I actually talk about this with, I guess just like my therapist, but my life coach, is like, when you have an idea and you believe in something and you share it with someone around you and they don't give you that feedback, like that positive feedback, that if you do that so many times, the idea almost dies inside you. You're like, yes, no, like I can't do that. And so if you're hanging out with people who aren't emulating the life or in the life that you want, and you're saying these ideas to them and then your ideas are dying, a lot of people give up there. They're like, oh, well, this just isn't for me. And no one around me is like this. And I'm not like this. And that's not my life. Yeah. And when you start getting that positive feedback from people and they start bouncing ideas off of you, the chemistry, I think, in your body and in your brain starts to change, and you start to believe what is possible, and you don't even see what's not possible anymore. All you start to see are possibilities for yourself, opportunities for yourself. And when you're like in that, state of mind, other people, I think, read that with you. Like, obviously you're like, hey, let's get on a podcast. It's like, I literally got on a podcast and said how my boyfriend killed my dog. And I've gotten so much opportunity from it. And it's not because I said that I killed my dog. It's because I said there were all of these things in front of me that were supposed to stop me, and I didn't. And then other people, want to work with you and want to get to know you and just want to collaborate with you. So I would say, like, you have to make a decision of what you want and then be around people who can help you get there, because you can't do it on your own. You're stuck in your own head with your own thoughts, and they're just circling, and someone has to coach you out of it. Just like when you're in sports or working out or whatever, like someone else has to look at you and be like, you're doing that wrong. Like, stop doing it like that. Right.
Yeah. Coaching is such a mirror, and I think you're spot on. It's like, if you're sitting at tables where everyone's trying to talk you out of your vision and your big ideas and your goals, you have got to leave the table. Like, whether it's friends from high school or family, like, I'm not saying abandon them, but spend more time at the other table than that one, especially at the beginning. I feel like I had to close out a lot of people in my life, especially at the beginning, because I wasn't confident enough. Now I don't care. Like, you can shoot down my ideas all day, like, won't even affect me. But especially at the beginning, it's like you have to nurture that idea, that vision, that goal, that plan, like it's a baby. And then as it grows and as you have more success, it's like the outside noise doesn't impact as much. But did you have a mentor back when you first started, or a coach or anything like that?
Yeah, it was my boyfriend that killed my dog.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
That's a weird one.
The wildest part I think about when I think about my life is I feel like I almost owe my success to him, which sounds crazy, but where I was at was I was in the industry and I was failing so bad, and someone said, oh, you should talk to this guy, like he can help you. He's very good at in this industry, very good at what he does. And so I started talking to him a lot about it, and he became someone that I trusted and looked up to because sorry, my thing is falling. He became someone that I trusted and I looked up to, because he was helping me and I was seeing success in my own life. But besides that, what I used to do is, I would get up every morning and put YouTube on and listen to, all the guys, Grant Cardone, Gary Vee, Ed Milet, Patrick Bet-David, Brad, all of these guys I used to listen to obsessively. Like when I still do it today. When I do my makeup, when I'm blow drying my hair, when I'm driving in the car, when I'm at the gym, I was like brainwashing myself with all of these people's words and ideas because no one else around me, I was dating guys at the time, and I remember reading the 10X rule, and I was like, you have to read this book. It's so good. And they're like, I'm not reading that book. And I'm like, wait, why wouldn't you want to read it? It's like life-changing. And they'd be like, and some of my friends would be like, I don't read, and like make these comments.
Oh God.
And, people talk about trying to like detach from relationships and friendships and how hard it is. But if you just put continuous effort into self-growth, the separation naturally happens. You don't have to separate from them. Like when I tell my friends, like, I don't want to get shit-faced on the weekend and I want to be, growing my business. It's like, if I'm confident and I'm just going to pursue what I want to do, they're just not going to come. And then it just gets to the point where you guys just aren't talking as much and you just grow apart naturally and there's no bad feelings. It's just, you're on different paths. So one of my friends said that to me the other day, like, I don't know how to, detach from all these people that aren't good for me. And I'm like, you don't have to. I'm like, just keep doing the things that you want to do and keep doing the things that are good for you. And it's just going to happen all on its own. You're going to look up one day and you're going to be like, oh my God, I haven't talked to this person in 6 months. Like I've talked to them for my whole life.
Well, and I think too, that's like how you end up at other tables or in other rooms or in other relationships, because you have to seek things out that are more in alignment with, you at your new level, which is probably not going to be like a nightclub or, I'm all down to celebrate a victory or whatever, go out with the girls, but that's not going to be the norm. Like the norm is going to be different networking events or even virtual things. Like I think that will happen much more naturally than people often assume. That's such a good point.
Yeah, I think that, a lot of people, and I mean, I do it myself now, every stage of the way. I have a lot of anxiety and I'm always looking into the future about what could go wrong and worried about everything. But like, just especially with relationships and stuff, that's just the honest truth, is you don't have to worry about doing any of that or being lonely, because if you just stay the path, like you're going to pick up people along the way. It just, you naturally lose people and gain people. And if you just keep growing, that just keeps happening again and again and again until you've recycled relationships and gone through relationships so many times that then you meet people and you're like, I used to say to Brian, like, this was like years ago, I used to be like, I think I have no friends because all my friends are millionaires. Or like, I have no friends because all of my friends are, these people that I've been watching. I'm like, I want to be friends with them. I'm like, I don't want to be friends with people that I'm with. I don't want to hang out with them. I'm like, I want to do all this cool stuff and sales and selling businesses and making money. I'm like, I want to do that stuff. So I had to level up myself so that the people who were in that position wanted to also, be friends with me. And one thing that I learned about, I guess, like just through this experience and, starting this new company is that, when I'm looking for people to work with, it's like, I'm looking for people who are like me, right? You probably think this yourself. If I could just clone myself 10 times, imagine the company we'd have, right?
Yeah.
And like, you're like, if I could just clone the work ethic and the,
Katie, my business partner, I'll always say too, like, we have to hire people who think like us or who are better than us. Like that's it. I think I do a good job at hiring people better than me. I'm like, what would I do without you? But
or hire assets. But so you have to think about the person who wants to get hired or who wants to be in those crowds. It's like, you have to put in the effort and the time and the consistency to be that asset. It's like, if someone goes to work with me and they're like, oh, this girl was a high school dropout, 2 kids by 19, no dad, then in a super abusive relationship where like someone tried to kill her and killed her dog, and she also owns this massive company and shows up on social media every day and is happy and like is a great person, you're like, oh, I want that girl on my team. She is a winner, right? Like there's nothing that could make her lose. And so, you think at a certain point in your life, and I thought this even before, I'm like, I went and met with Rene Rodriguez and his wife, Maddie. And I remember saying, like, I'm heading into all these bigger relationships and I just feel like I have a lack of confidence. I'm like, because the only thing that I have to offer is I'm honest. I'm very hardworking. And I forget, I said one more thing, and he looked at me and he goes like, what else do you need? And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, it was like this like aha moment where I'm like, oh my God, I'm looking for people who are honest and hardworking and want to grow. Other people are looking, that's me. I'm like, they're looking for me. These people who I want to work with, they're looking for me. I'm like, so all I have to do is be in the right rooms with the right people. And then you just end up connecting with them.
And you literally put yourself there though. And like, I know you, so if people are listening, it's like, who's Brad? Brad is a guy named Brad Lee, like L-E-A, I think is how you spell his last name, right? He's very famous in the, business. And I would also say a little bit in like the personal professional development space. But you just kind of like stayed in his like vibration, for lack of better word, for so long until you got his attention. And now he's your business partner, right? I mean, that's like a very quick summary.
Yeah. Well, I remember I bought a ticket. So like something else that I learned is that if you want to get to know these other people and you want to level up, like you essentially have to pay to be in their space. The spaces that these people hang out with are sales conferences that they're putting on. I paid $5,000 to go to like a CEO ticket to the Driven event. So I've been following like Albert and Sil Preciado since so many years. Like, I don't want to say before they were anything. I don't know how else to phrase it, but like when they had just started like in the entrepreneur space, and I've wanted to go to Driven for so long. And so I bought the CEO ticket. It was $5,000. It's like, who spends $5,000 to go to a sales event? Like, but
someone who thinks that they're going to get at least a $5,000 return, I guess.
Well, you have to realize that everyone else who you're sitting around also spent $5,000.
Yes.
So you automatically just put yourself in the vicinity of everyone that's around you at that table of at least 12 people who can spend $5,000 on a ticket, right? And so they're thinking differently, and those are the people that you want to be with. And one of the kids at that place said, oh yeah, I work with Brad. We have a training program with him. And I'm like, a training program? He goes, yeah, a solar training program. And he said that he made $400,000 a month off of this training program. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, you just like teach people how to sell and like charge them, whatever. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I want one of those. And so then I'm like, I want that. And so I ended up getting on a call with Brad's team. And the way that this actually came about was a little coincidental because they took me through the whole program and I was like, yes, I want to buy it. I spent like $30,000 on the program. But then when I got to the payments page, they were offering all of these different payment providers. And I said to them, how much are those payment providers offering to you to promote their products? And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well, if you're telling every business owner that comes through the door to use Stripe or to use authorize.net, you should be getting a rev share of the profits, like you're a referral partner. And so that's where my mind got spinning, that I wanted to get on the phone with them and be like, hey, let's partner up and do something because you're in a position where you can make a lot of money. But then I ended up enrolling in their groups. I spent $4,500 on another ticket to go to another sales event that was like Maddie and Renee's. And so along with that also, it was airfare for Brian and I, hotels, cars, right? So like each ticket ends up costing like $8,000, $10,000, and then plus $30,000 on that program. And then you're finally in a position where someone will look at you and be like, okay, well, this girl spent some money to be here. She consistently showed up. And then, you actually can stand out to someone, or maybe their perspective shifts on you a little, like, oh, who is this person? Like they won't go away. And, they're in all the groups and they're around. And
yeah. And so you finally got his attention. And now he's your partner in this business, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's such a great story. I mean, obviously it's your lived experience and also a big investment of time, money, and energy went into it. But I think it's like the whole thing. It's like, it's that moment sitting in the apartment staring at the wall where you're like, this is literally not my story and I'm only available for these other things. And it's like the universe or God is going to deliver. I think that putting money and energy and time into something, you have to be willing to put in as much as you want to get out.
And the other thing is you have to keep in mind that like there were certain points of my life where I was very ashamed and embarrassed of the point that I was at. So like I remember when I first started, I was like 2 years into my business and I'm in Louisiana. I had put my kids in a I had moved down there. I didn't really check out the schools. I thought if I lived in a nice neighborhood, the kids would go to a nice school, and they didn't. The school was like a third world country. It was terrible. And they also like hit the kids. And so a kid brought a gun, a third grader brought a gun to school. And that was like the last straw for me. And I'm like, I'm done. I'm like, I pulled the kids out of school, and I couldn't afford to pay $1,200 a month to put them in private school. So I ended up homeschooling them while I was working. So I'm waking up at 7 a.m., putting both of my kids in the back of my car with laptops, and then driving around and cold calling business owners while my kids sit in the car and wait for their mom in between each stop.
Dude, this is why I can't understand how some people say they want to have a business, but they won't even post anything on social media. Like, that is ridiculous.
Yeah. And so like at that time, you know, I'm slightly embarrassed, but just trying to pull myself together. Like I have a picture of me and my kids in this auto mechanic shop, and I'm signing paperwork with him, and my kids are in the back table, you know, on their iPads doing their homeschool work. And I remember feeling so embarrassed at the time that I couldn't afford anything, and that like that was the situation that I put my kids in. And I tried to make it fun and blast music, and we got snacks and whatever. But the reality is sometimes they were out with me for 12 hours a day, driving around, trying to make money, right? And so like at one point that story is very embarrassing to you, but then somebody hears about your story and they're like, that girl went through all of that and she's still pushing. Like, and then you become appealing to people who are also working that hard. They're like, oh shit, I want you on my team. Like,
yeah,
you know, a lot of determination and work ethic, and other people who have that want to be near you then.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I'm just so impressed with you, and I'm so thankful for you for coming on this and like being willing to share the behind the scenes stories, because I'm sure people, all of your new followers from being on Brad's podcast and hopefully from this one as well, like they're going to look and they're going to see, like, you know, maybe they'll scroll a little bit on Instagram, but they, you know, people tend to see the shiny object, like the finished product, if you will. Yeah. And I don't think people often get to see what really happened on the way. And it's so important, I feel like, as women, to share those stories. And I just want to thank you so much for your vulnerability. And also you're making more job opportunities for women. So that blows my mind too.
Yeah, well, that's the next step. You know, you can only go so far as an individual. And then the only way that you go farther is obviously by bringing other people into your business and making them successful too. Like you can only do so much yourself. And then what's left after that is you cap out, and then you say, well, my next step is to bring this opportunity to everyone else. And I mean, it's great. Like I said, all the women who come forward and they're like, can you help me? Like, can you help me get out of this situation? Can you help me make money? And when you start to change people's lives and people are, you know, coming forward and sharing all those stories with you and their vulnerabilities, you're like, okay, you're like, you know, I wouldn't want my life to have gone the way that it did, but it makes it so much better when you can share it with people and then realize that you actually are, through your experience, like, making other people's lives better and like getting them out of that experience. And that almost is just very healing in itself. Yeah.
It's making a huge impact. So thank you. So where do people find you online? Share with us.
So my Instagram is Phoebe.Duprey. So I'm sure you can like throw that in the caption or something.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. I think my TikTok is the same, Phoebe.Duprey. And then my YouTube is just Phoebe Duprey.
Awesome. And your company is realmerchantservices.com?
Yeah, and our company, realmerchantservices.com. Right now, we just launched our agent program. So anyone that wants to get signed up or is interested in working with us, we do free training. So it doesn't cost anything. There's no startup fees. You can go in, you log in on the website, you click the button, become an agent. It's going to take you through a training program. After you're through that training program, you're eligible to become an agent. And the other thing is, if any business owners want to work with us, they can also go and click there's a get started button on our website, and they can submit their website. So if you don't want to be an agent, but you do want to save money on your processing fees, or you do want to work with us or see if we can provide, you know, better support or solutions, you can definitely go through that process. And then we have free consultations.
Love it. Thank you so much, Phoebe.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thank you.